Welcome everyone to the afternoon committee meetings of the Bellingham City Council. We had one committee meeting this morning. That was Planning and Community Development. We'll report on that in the evening. The first committee here in the afternoon is the Justice Committee. That committee is chaired by Councilmember April Parker. Thank you, Michael. Today we're coming together in response to Council and Administrative's interest in the Bellingham criminal justice system. The administration has proposed a series of presentations aimed at distilling and separating the dependent actions within the administration and justice in the city. And today we're going to start with information-only session on law enforcement's role in that system. And so I think with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Cook and I think Lieutenant Almer.
Actually, I'll start. Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office. Just briefly, I want to talk a little bit about the I'm sorry. I'm joined by Councilmember Borneman and Councilmember Vargas. Sorry about that. That's all right. Good afternoon. Okay. Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office. So I did just want to mention briefly from the memo in the packet, of course today we'll be talking about law enforcement's role, but moving forward on the 25th we'd like to have a discussion on the role of the prosecutor and municipal court, the types of offenses most commonly seen by BPD in municipal court, case processing and sentencing and legal financial obligations. These are items that have come up in previous discussions. On October 9th, we'd like to have a discussion of the system-wide use of alternatives, so that would include not only City of Bellingham, but Whatcom County. And then on October 23rd, a discussion of how the criminal justice spending impacts the city's budget. I had mentioned, I think, to you, April, that this should coincide with our discussions around the biennial budget and the supplemental, the biennial budget adjustments that we will be discussing as we move forward. So if that outline sounds good to you all, we'll proceed as articulated here. Great, thank you.
Sound good, committee? Okay.
And I believe Peter had a few comments.
Yeah, Peter Ruffato, Legal Department. Real briefly, I hope this is helpful. I just want to identify some themes that I think you will see throughout these presentations, and it's something that maybe hasn't been emphasized as much as it could be, for example, in like some of the task force discussions. And one of them is the role issue. You know, we're talking about the different roles that each entity has. And I think more than a lot of things that are before council, it's kind of it's complicated because each decision maker has their own role. And one of the big ones is the legislative versus administrative. You know, council, legislative bodies can provide tools that then can be utilized at the discretion of law enforcement, at the discretion of the prosecutor, at the discretion of the judge, and everyone has their kind of independent role in that. And so I think some of the challenges come from that kind of that aspect of it. The second theme is it's sometimes I think that the criminal justice system, for example, Vero has done a lot of statistical analysis. In some ways, it's not very amenable sometimes to data, because embedded with each one of those statistics is a very complicated story of an individual, their needs, what behavior they're undergoing, their history. And so that's another theme that I think makes it a challenge when you're trying to look for solutions or how to make improvements. And sometimes when you hear a statistic, whatever that may be, whether it's the number of pretrial folks we have in the jail or whatever, sometimes that may or may not be really helpful on the once you start delving into it. And then the third one is, you know, at least after you get past the law enforcement stage, it is an adversarial process. It kind of gets back to the role issue. You have a prosecutor, you have a public defender representing a client, and in front of the judge, and that individual can make decisions that we may think are not in that person's best interest, but they have every right to do so, and they will press their case. And so, just wanted to mention those themes.
Thank you. Committee, is there anything before we continue? Okay. Mayor, did you have something? Just talking in class? Okay, is it Chief Cook or Lieutenant Almer?
Yeah. Not to belabor the beginning of the discussion, but I do think Peter hit on one critical theme, and that is complexity. The criminal justice system is an extremely complex system. That complexity is made even more difficult at times because the way law enforcement in this country is structured, law enforcement agencies are to reflect the desires and wishes of the community that they protect and serve. That community indicates how they want law enforcement delivered to that community. And as we discussed how best to go about providing the kind of information that you're looking for, we again recognized how difficult and complex that is. Frankly, there are aspects of law enforcement, and particularly in regards to how the law changes and adjusts to society over time, that make our jobs more difficult. And as a result of this complexity, we were looking for a way to provide the information that you were asking for in a manner whereby you garner the greatest benefit. And as the Chief of Police, I do want to say that I appreciate the fact that we're taking this opportunity to provide that information to you, because I believe through that information you're going to have a much clearer perspective of what the jobs that the men and women of this police department perform every day and how difficult their decision-making processes can be because of the varying demands placed upon us. So without revealing too much of the presentation, I do want to mention that the decision was made to look at it from the aspect of 3 scenarios. And my understanding is the discussion that follows on over the next several meetings will take that path of 3 scenarios and try to apply them in a way as to show you how our officers look at each scenario and what the critical components are, and then what decision options there are, if any, in some cases. And then for the prosecutor's office and the courts, similarly, how they apply differing law or court rulings to that situation or that arrest or non-arrest situation. So it is complex, but I think what we've done, and I want to extend my appreciation to the police department staff and Peter's staff in helping bring about, through our discussions, this method of providing information. I think you'll find it helpful. So with that, I would invite Lieutenant Almer down.
Yeah, and I know that it is quite complex, and it's why we decided that this was time to have this committee, because a lot of this is going to be mostly information, and it's not information just for us, but it's our community that we need to understand the complexity of all of this, so that we can then engage in that conversation on kind of a level playing field of we all are understanding these pieces, and just a wonderful resource for us to point people back to so they can understand that complexity. And we were just talking this weekend about some complex issues happening in our neighborhood, and people just demanding, like they wanted something removed and done right now, and I have to have these conversations one-on-one, and I thought, oh, it'd be so nice if I could just direct them to a committee meeting and let them come to the same place where I'm at, and then we can talk about some strategies for fixing the problem. So thank you.
And Council Member, I grasp the type of frustration that every one of you go through when you're dealing with constituents about issues. My hope is, and I think you will, come to recognize the frustration level that the officers of this department sometimes face when they're really truly trying to help someone, but there's a lack of resources or there's a lack of paths to take that would truly be helpful, as opposed to just moving the problem down the road, so to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, if I stand?
Yeah. There you go.
Knees are bad, so. If you see me looking down at any time, I'm referencing the document. I printed up extra copy for all of you to have afterwards, so it's kind of a reference thing. My name's Don. I'm with the Bellingham Police Department, obviously. So I'm one of the patrol commanders, and I appreciate you having me here, because what I'm going to do is, before we get into the 3 examples that the chief and Mr. Raffato were talking about and what's going to go down the road, I was asked to also give kind of a basic, hey, Cop 101 or Law Enforcement 101 as to what we do, going from the mindset that maybe everyone here doesn't know the ins and outs of everything. So no disrespect intended, everyone. If you're like, I went to law school for 15 years, my apologies. But I'm just going to kind of do that. That way we're all on the same page and have kind of the same background. So what we're going to talk about is, first of all, the primary objectives. I'm a patrol commander, so when you think patrol at the police department, that's what the public most often thinks affiliated with law enforcement. So we have the marked cars, we have the marked uniforms. I report for a shift. I work that shift by handling 911 service calls. I do self-initiated activity. I identify community issues, maybe go talk to people, but that's my shift. So I'm not like a detective or a narcotics specialist or like a CSI person. I'm just patrol. So the reason I want to focus on patrol is because, A, that's 95% of your interaction with the public comes from our patrol officers, be it on bike or on foot, in a car or whatnot. We're kind of the faces in the uniforms of our agency, and most of the 911 calls go to us, and that's how we interact with the public. Our patrol division, or our patrol officers, they exist. In the public side, a lot of people go, well, there's the police, and we hear it all the time. Well, if you do something bad, they're going to arrest you, right? But they forget about all the other facets that we exist in the community. So I broke it down in the notebook, or in the notes that I'm going to give you. There's basically 5 of our primary objectives, why patrol exists. The first one, to protect and serve. Everyone's heard that before, but someone calls 911, someone requires an emergent response. We are tasked by society, hey, we have authority to do something, right? So no disrespect to those other professions, but like a bricklayer, a library worker, a baker, they can't come in most situations and say, hey, I'm going to take away your freedoms, like we can, right? So we're empowered by society and by the law to do that. So protect and serve is the thing that most people think about. The second one is crime prevention. So if we're around and people in the area go, hey, this town has a police department, there's police officers out there looking for criminal activity, right? Then they go, well, maybe we don't want to do that criminal activity. So that's why we patrol our neighborhoods. That's why we have additional resources at the department, like, hey, patrol takes a call, we'll give it to detectives who can do more thorough investigations and do all this kind of stuff. That's why we're around, crime prevention, because we don't want to have crime just running rampant in Bellingham. Another one of our jobs is to preserve the peace. So what I tell at the college that I teach at, or like any of our new officers, hey, the Bill of Rights is our job. We go to a lot of non-criminal things. You'd be surprised at some of the calls we go to where we have to act as either moderators or mediators between two people who just like, well, hey, that person's lawn sprinkler water is hitting my grass. I want them to stop, arrest them. And we're like, whoa. So that's one thing. And we want to uphold the constitutional rights of all people. And sometimes it's not a cut and dry, hey, this is a criminal thing. So we have to, we have to walk that line and talk with people. We exist to enforce laws. So sometimes we regulate public conduct. So people don't drive 900 miles an hour in a school zone because they know traffic officers or patrol officers, or you can get a speeding ticket, right? Things like that. That's where warning tickets come into play too. If I contact you and say, hey, sir, you have expired tabs, did you know that? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, here's a warning ticket. If you could get that corrected, that'd be great. Same kind of goal. We're regulating public conduct, but at the same time, hey, we're educating and doing a good job at doing that. And finally, what most people say to our men and women when we're out in the field, arrest. Okay, we are tasked by law and authorized by society. We're the only people that are public servants that, hey, I can now take their freedom away, right? If you've broken a law, be it a misdemeanor, be it a felony, I can, against your will if need be, take you to jail, right? Not a lot of people can do that. That's a huge power that we have to obviously wield responsibly, but that's why 9 times out of 10 when people see police officers are like, hey, is something wrong? It's like, well, no, we have all these other tasks within our community. We have all these other things we want to do, but we're most identified for because we take people to jail if need be. Okay, so that's kind of why patrol exists. Now getting into the legalese or the legal aspects of how we encounter folks, regardless of what's going on, whether we're called there for service, whether we see something, whether we just happen to be walking about and something gets drawn to our attention, there are, in lawyer speak, it's called a valid core transaction. So like our officers have to know this backwards and forwards. There's 3 categories. One is called a social contact. So if I saw you and said, hey, my name's Don, nice weather, blah, blah, did you see this movie? Just having a conversation is a social contact. There's no requirement for that person to stay there. They're like, hey, Donnie, I don't like you. I'm out of here. Okay, have a good day. It's just a social contact, and that happens all the time. So I can park my patrol car, I can get out, I can walk the beat, I can just ask people, hey, how's it going? Have you seen things in this neighborhood? Blah, blah, blah. Just general talk. But when I was on patrol, I tended to be kind of a little bit different because I'd say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. You don't have to if you don't want to, because it's just easier. People can go, oh, do I have to talk to you? No. Okay, see ya. Bye. Have a good day. But it's a social contact. Citizens can terminate that at any time. Okay, the next different category is either called a detention or a seizure. Okay, back in the day, they used to call them Terry stops. It's after our Supreme Court case, Terry v. Ohio. Okay, so a detention or a seizure occurs when that person doesn't feel they have a right to leave. So if Mr. Hamill, if I said, hey, I'm with the police in my marked police uniform, here's my marked police car, I'm handcuffing you and putting you in the back. 9 times out of 10, he'd probably go, okay, I can't go anywhere. I can't just walk and leave. That's called a detention. And there has to be a legal basis for us to do that. Now we're getting into laws. So an officer has to have what the courts call reasonable suspicion. A reasonable officer needs to think that a crime has occurred, is occurring, or is about to occur, and this person is somehow involved. So if he called and said, hey, my car got broken into, and it looked like Don Ulmer and was dressed like Don Ulmer, and look, there's Don Ulmer, and I'm carrying his car stereo away, an officer can look and go, okay, I'm reasonable. A crime has occurred. I think this person's involved. I'm going to talk with them. And that's where you get a detention. An officer's empowered by the law to go, hey, Don Ulmer Police Department, you're not free to leave. And if the person wants to leave, we can hold them there. It is a detention. It is a seizure. And again, we have to articulate why, but that's a basis of Supreme Court law. That's what we have to know backwards and forwards. Okay? And then the final category is called an arrest. Okay? So if reasonable suspicion was a reasonable officer feels crime has occurred, is occurring, is about to occur, and this person's responsible, probable cause is through articulable facts or evidence that officer believes a crime has occurred, is occurring, or about to occur, and this person's responsible. So what I usually tell my class is, hey, reasonable suspicion is like, hey, something's rotten in Denmark. Like, that doesn't look right. It's 3 in the morning, the guy's under a car with a sawzall. This is weird. I'm going to talk to you, right? Hey, you're not free to leave because I'm going to do my investigative detention. Oh, it's your car? Oh, it's your, okay, no problem. Have a good day, and then we go. But if I go, this isn't your car, that's a crime, we've arrested you for this behavior before, and now 4 witnesses say, yeah, I saw him breaking into that car, now I arrest him. Okay, so those kind of categories, those are the 3, but remember, it's fluid. It's always fluid. So I could just be walking down going, I'm going to go get a sandwich. And I look, and I see somebody committing a crime, where normally I go, hey, are you having a good day? Social contact. Now, if I see him committing a crime, arrest. Right? Or I could talk to somebody, hey, how are you? Good. Cool. And they give me all this information. Well, geez, I just robbed 30 banks. Okay, well, now you can't go anywhere. So now that social contact has turned into a detention, and I'm going to investigate further. And if I feel that that crime has actually occurred by that person, that social contact, which lead to a detention, now leads to an arrest. Right? Conversely, it can go the other way. That looks weird. I'm going to detain somebody. Oh, it's legit? Okay, cool. Have a good day. That investigative detention might bump down to a social contact. So there's not hard, fast rules with regards to how we're doing it. There are hard, fast rules into my authority to do so. So if I wanted to talk to Mr. Rufato and go, hey, you don't need to talk to me, he's like, okay, great. I don't want to talk to you. Okay. Then that's it. But if I go, hey, police department, obviously, but hey, you're not free to leave. I'm investigating a crime of violence, and you might be involved in this. It's quite clear. Now, if he tries to leave, I can force him to stay, right? Or let's say he has a warrant. Hey, police department, you have a warrant. You're under arrest. You are not free to leave. Little bit differences. So those are the valid court transactions, and I talked about them in the handout that I'll give you. So if you can remember why we exist and those 3 transactions, now you understand kind of the tip of the iceberg with regards to complexity of the calls we can go to. And of those, there are civil calls where we have no authority to do anything, right? So, hey, he likes the Seahawks. She doesn't. Why'd you call the police? Because I want you to explain to the person why the Seahawks are great. That's not our gig. I have no authority to do that. I can't make that person listen to me, and I can't hold them there. So it's like, okay, but we get those calls. The other one is civil, where it's an infraction. Now, an infraction is when you think of a ticket. So if I make a traffic stop for speeding, that's a civil infraction. They won't go to jail on an infraction. I won't take a speeder to jail, or like a sitting in line in the in the city center. That's an infraction. Okay, I can't take anybody against their will to jail for an infraction. Okay, and then we have a civil, the last of the civils, which is an emergent detention. And the only reason law enforcement is involved is because, again, we're the few that get to, based on authority, unwillingly take somebody somewhere they might not want to go. So a civil emergent detention is intoxicants, or maybe a mental health issue or a perceived mental health issue. But the overarching rule for us as police is if someone is displaying an inability to care for themselves to the point where it puts them or somebody else in danger, we're authorized by state law to take them into what we call protective custody. So if you hear the call to 911, there's somebody, let's say, passed out on the sidewalk, but they're draped over the sidewalk and lying into traffic. We get that call, and as officers, that's not a criminal offense. There's no crime on record in Bellingham that they're breaking. But I'm going to check their welfare and go, holy moly, they're intoxicated so bad that they can't function and they're going to get run over. We can now take them on an emergent detention and take them either to like the triage center or Peace Health St. Joe's for an alcohol protective custody hold. Or let's say the person says, hey, they're walking down the road and they're saying some suicidal things. That's not a crime. I cannot arrest a person for that. But if I check on their welfare and go, hey, are you feeling okay? Well, I'm not feeling that great. I'd like to talk to like a mental health provider. Okay, great. So we can put them in touch with a bunch of other services. But if we feel they're an imminent risk to themselves or somebody else, maybe they've just harmed themselves, then we can, against their will, take them to a mental health facility, even if they don't want to go. So if they go, no, you're not taking me, well, they no longer get a say in that. We will route them to services. And we're the only ones who can do that. Like the fire department, the medics and stuff, they can't do that. They can assist us in doing the transport and stuff, but we're granted the authority by law to be able to do that. Okay? So those are the civil, and then there's the criminal side. And on the criminal side, there's either a crime or a warrant. That's a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, and that's handled through Bellingham Municipal Court. Or there's a crime or a warrant that's a felony, and that's handled by a Whatcom County Superior Court. So like if I'm trespassing, I went and got told, hey, you can no longer be on the King Street McDonald's property. You're trespassed for a year. And I knowingly go there and knowingly remain, I'm breaking the law, that's a misdemeanor. Okay? But if I say, hey, I'm going to steal your car and then like rob a bank and then light everything on fire, those are various felonies. The Bellingham Municipal Court doesn't get involved in that. That's Whatcom County Superior Court. And 9 times out of 10, felonies will almost always get booked. Whereas misdemeanors do not. Okay. Sorry about that. So now you're hopefully starting to see that it's not just cut and dried like, oh, okay, we call, this happens, someone goes to jail. It's, we call, do we have the authority to do something about the situation? What is the situation? And most importantly, what does the situation of this person need? What is the end result? And if it's 2 people arguing, okay, can we mediate the argument? If it's this person robbed a bank and we have them, okay, this person needs to be incarcerated. Is it this person's trespassing? Okay, well, that's not a crime we book for, so here's a ticket. Are you speeding? There's all these various things where our officers have to make these decision points. And a lot of times, it's not our decision. As much as we'd like it to be, it's just we're kind of playing with the hand that got dealt to us, if that makes sense. So that's a real quick, just kind of basic 101 thing that we're talking about. And again, I wrote it down in these reference materials. But hopefully that'll give you some backstory into the decision point and the examples we're going to provide. Okay? Any questions about what I just discussed about the different thingies?
Pinky?
I have one quick question, Dawn. You mentioned the alcohol protection hold. Can you tell me a little bit more about that with Peace Health or something?
Yeah, so again, for us, as officers in the field, if someone is an imminent risk to themselves or to anyone else, based on level of intoxicants or drugs or maybe a mental health crisis or anything like that, we're authorized to take what they call protective custody of somebody and take them somewhere where they won't basically get hurt. So if somebody's alcohol intoxication is so high that they can't function, they maybe can't walk, or maybe they can't talk, or they can't eat or anything like that, we can take them to either like the triage center for intoxicants, or a lot of times the triage center is full. So our officers will have to transport somebody to Peace Health St. Joe's, and they hold them there for a determined amount of time till they, for lack of a better term, till they sober up and they're not a danger to themselves due to their intoxication. Give them kind of a safe place to be.
Yeah.
So.
I think respecting that you're going to go to your scenarios, an important thing for the constituents to know is that, and Chief helped me with this, it's not illegal in this state to be intoxicated.
Correct.
It is illegal to drink in public. So we'll get, like, I'll have constituents, this happened this weekend, so angry that, like, this person is clearly intoxicated, but they're not hurting anybody. They're not breaking any laws. And so sometimes it's really hard for people to understand, but I don't like that behavior. I don't like them being there. I don't like how they're acting.
Agreed.
And I think that that's, where other states, that's illegal. You can actually drink in public, but you can't be intoxicated in public. So I just want to make that clear for people that sometimes get very frustrated with our police department because they're like, but they're intoxicated.
Correct. And with regards to constituents, they can always look at like the Bellingham Municipal Code and look in Title 10. And I'll tell you all about the criminal stuff and things that we can and can't enforce. The RCW, the Revised Code of Washington, will also say we adopt some of that, but we also have certain city ordinances and rules that we follow. But yeah, being intoxicated, unless you're driving or in physical control of a motor vehicle, just if I'm drunk walking around, that in and of itself is not a crime. Okay, well, I guess unless you're under 21 and you're violating minor in possession, but yeah, so, and that's the thing. But also, one thing that our officers, our men and women that see, we just see a different side of a lot of stuff. So like everyone knows the legal limit for DUI is what? 0.08? Okay, so one of our patrol officers last week, we have these portable breath test devices, okay, for a welfare check. Hey, this person looks like they need help. Blew a 0.46. Okay, that walking and talking just fine. They're like, yeah, I don't really want to go to detox, but they're not endangering themselves. They're just conditioned. They're okay with that. So where any other person, like, I'm pretty sure I would be comatose. So it's just like, but it's just where it's like, hey, we want to offer this service, but we don't have the authority to say, we're going to make you do this, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, cool. Okay, so part two is I was shown that Vera Institute, that system draft map, that flow chart with all the different boxes and diamonds and all that stuff. So on the far left is the law enforcement section, and it's a spoke with a bunch of stuff.
A moment. Marie, is that something you can put up on the, so you can go ahead and continue talking, but she's going to put it up so that the people listening can see what you're talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, on the law enforcement response, there's a branch, there's a little tree branch that breaks off into a whole bunch of things. At the top it says warning, and on the bottom it says emergency room. So that little tree, that decision point, oh, cool.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
And just for everybody's information, we have only one projector working. Hopefully it'll be fixed in a couple weeks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So what I'm referencing here is law enforcement response, and then all these different things. And the authors of this state quite clearly, hey, it's a draft. It may consist of inaccuracy. No problems with that. But this is kind of what we're talking about today. So with the backstory of knowing whether or not we have the authority, what level of authority we have, and what the situation is may lead to any or all of these. So that's where we're going to get into our examples and things like that. But it's important to remember that, let's say, hey, it's a civil with no authority, the sprinkler on my lawn thing. Well, I can't really refer it. I can suggest maybe dispute resolution or something, but it's not a crime. I'm not taking any of this else. Maybe if it's a speeding ticket, well, if it's a speeding ticket, there is no probable cause or warrants. We're not doing any of this. We might give a warning or we might give an infraction because, again, it's a civil infraction. It doesn't lead to more severe penalties. But if it's like an assault, right? Okay, well, can we ever give warnings on assault? All the time warnings are given because then the two people who got in the assault say, you know what, I don't want to do anything. So to the public might go, well, cops aren't doing their job. It's like, no, these two people don't want to do anything about this. So then we might move to that. Or, hey, we might need to refer it to the prosecutor down the road because we have to do further investigation. Or if someone's in crisis or maybe they have some alcohol on board or anything like that, we can always refer people to our excellent mental health liaison that we have at our agency. Or it might go down the road, and if they don't go to court, maybe they get a warrant, things like that. Or if they need medical attention prior to doing the criminal side, hey, we need to make sure their health is okay. So one little thing, as I indicate in the handouts that I'll give you, can have multiple things associated with it. So that's what we also have to remind ourselves when we're doing stuff. And let's see if I can overlay. So civil issues that don't meet legal thresholds don't end up in jail. So that's warning or infractions, right? And then protective custody, we don't want, jail is not the appropriate place. So if someone's in mental health crisis, I don't want them in the jail. I want them with the mental health service. Or if someone's intoxication level is so high, way back in the day when I was new, we used to have to take people to jail so they could sober up. And then we don't do that anymore. We take them to either like the triage center or Peace Health St. Joe's, things like that. And then criminal, there's always that decision making. Okay? And if they go to jail with us, it's either mandatory. Okay? We don't have a choice if it's like a felony or a misdemeanor crime of violence, that's domestic violence, or in this city, DUI, right? If they pose a public safety risk, okay? If someone's downtown just punching every person they see, normally we don't jail for assault fourth, a common assault, right? But if we go, you know what, if we don't take them to jail, they're going to keep doing this, we'll call the jail to ask for an exception and try and get that person somewhere, basically for the public safety. And if they have felony warrants. I was speaking with a citizen the other day saying, well, this person got booked on a shoplifting. Why is that? So I researched the thing. Well, they didn't get booked on the shoplifting. We contacted them on a shoplifting, which is a criminal misdemeanor that we normally don't book on. So normally we write a citation, here you go, there's a court date, see you. But our officers usually check people for warrants and things like that. That particular person had a felony warrant. Well, there's no discretion there. They get booked into jail. And we're told if we book somebody for a felony, we also have to book on the local charge. So that makes sure that municipal court can get tabs on them and start that proceeding as well. So it might look, well, this person got booked for shoplifting, that's weird. Well, in actuality, the complete story is they got booked for something else, which necessitated the booking for something we don't normally book on.
And when you say booking to you is synonymous with going to jail?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, booking is synonymous with me to going to jail, and they have this little window and door, and they're accepted, and then they don't go out the other side. So that to me is booking. I apologize. And then I tried to highlight some of the decisions not to book into jail. If the jail's on restrictions due to population control measures, they tell us as patrol commanders and patrol sergeants, hey, we will only accept this. Anything outside of this, they won't take. So it's like, okay, so we won't book in that. If there's not a public safety risk, like there's a shoplifter, here's a ticket. We're not going to take that person to jail. And if they're having medical issues, so let's say if I say, hey, we're going to book this person for violent crime X, but they go, hey, you know what, I have a dialysis thing, I have this, that, and the other, and then suddenly the medical issue is more important for that person's well-being than that criminal thing, we'll take them to the hospital and just tell the hospital, hey, when you're done with everything you need to do, recontact our agency and we'll see what we want to do. Because we certainly don't want to take somebody, if they need emergent medical care, to a jail. We'd rather take them to a medical facility. And then another decision point for our officers are situational issues. So if we don't have a victim that wishes to cooperate with prosecution, they don't go. If the issue resolved itself, a lot of times if there's children, like, okay, if I take this person away, there's tiny children that have to fend for themselves. We can't do that. So we try and look at other means. Do we call Child Protective Services? Do we call family members? Is there something we can work out with the court? The officers, again, find themselves in a situation they did not create, but they have to deal with. So I just want to caution everybody that I think a lot of people, when they think police, they think, okay, police, and they take people to jail. That's not always the case, and it's certainly, especially with Bellingham Municipal Court and misdemeanor offenses, as you'll see, there's actually more times when we don't than when we do. And again, I'm talking misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, not felonies. Okay, different court system. Okay? So, with regards to that flow chart, any questions with regards to what I was explaining over here? All the differences and the backgrounds?
Yeah.
I understand the differences and stuff, but I think there's one element that further complicates a lot of these, whether it's stopping for an information stop or warning or infraction. The behavior of the person stopped at that point may end up leading to something further. You know, if they're stopped for a taillight out and you come up and they decide to resist or do other kinds of things, that it can complicate it quickly for the officer. And I think just, you know, that part, it's not just always as simple. It does become, it can be complicated very quickly based on somebody's behavior.
Agreed. An excellent example on what I'll try and tell the new officers during tactical discussions or like the class or something. I might, hey, I'm going to talk to this person for expired tabs. They might have just robbed a bank unbeknownst to me, and they think, oh, Don knows I robbed the bank. It's go time.
Yeah.
When I'm just like, oh, okay, well, it's past June, so I'm going to give them a warning for tabs. And now that's kind of going on. Right? So that's the situation. First shooting I got into involved on duty was a person, hey, come over and check on my buddy in the apartment. He doesn't look so good. We're like, okay, we're just there to help. So, yeah, so I totally agree with you, sir. Yes, excellent point.
And I just think for people to understand that when they are stopped for something like that, their behavior, you know, cooperate as much as possible with it, because, you know,
yeah, and part of
officers always have in the back of their mind, this could be much more than this, and so I just...
And generally we're inserting ourselves into a situation that we did not create, so we're just trying to play catch up.
Yeah, and then I'll say that we're already at 40 minutes, so if we could, as a council, maybe let you go through your scenarios.
Yep.
And then
Okay,
we can ask questions at that point.
Perfect, and I'm right on that section.
Okay.
So these, my caveat is overly simplistic, okay, and they're for demonstrative purposes. So it's going to help us and then the prosecutor's office in the court just to kind of say, here's the 3 examples. So example 1 is just simply a fight. So we're in the city center, 2 people are fighting. So they fight. Both parties agree, yeah, we fought, and let's say there's 100 witnesses, all who have streaming video, say, yep, they were fighting. Okay, so that is a violation of the Bellingham Municipal Code for disorderly conduct. You can't fight. So it's like, okay, great. So you willingly engaged in a fist fight. We think there's probable cause to arrest you for this. That is not a mandatory booking. That's a misdemeanor, non-mandatory booking offense. Nobody has warrants. Hey, are you guys going to get along? We're going separate ways with our friends. There's no risk to public safety. Here's a ticket and a court date. Here's a ticket and a court date. Okay? And then that's it. So that's example 1, just a fight. Because a lot of times people go, why didn't they go to jail? That's not how it's done. Okay? So non-mandatory, no public safety risk. Okay? Here you go. It's a misdemeanor, and away they go. Okay? Very overly simplistic. Think about, though, what if one of those people had an outstanding felony warrant? Now that turns into a booking, like I talked about the shoplifter with the warrant. So it's like, okay, so we booked them on the felony warrant, and now the city disorderly conduct, which we would normally not do. So the municipal court and the prosecutor's office go, well, why Don book him on a disorderly? That doesn't happen. Oh, it's because of this warrant. It's not because of the gravitas of the situation. It's just one of the other things involved. Or what if one of the combatants is so intoxicated we're thinking, okay, he doesn't get it. He's going to be a public risk by fighting more people, or perhaps, hey, this is our chance to say, hey, you need some help, right? Because you're so drunk you can't take care of ourselves. So now that emergent detention, that protective custody might come into play. So instead of a ticket and a court date, we might go, hey, we're taking you to, let's say, Peace Health St. Joe's on an alcohol protective custody hold. Sure, we'll give them a ticket and a court date, but now their custody is transferred to the hospital. And they might be there for a little bit, tying up that service, right? And they might call other things in to help care for that individual. So, again, overly simplistic, but just kind of a what if. Example 2 is an arrest that can lead to services. Okay, and this is not the norm. Okay, so the example is 911 gets 10 calls a day from somebody who has mental health issues. 10 calls a day, and they range from the UFOs are here, the FBI is attacking me, I see Bigfoot, whatever you want to imply, but it's still a call for service. And what happens in those 10 if 2 goes, hey, there's somebody on my porch, I don't recognize them, it's the dead of night, I think they're trying to break in. Well, we're going to go to something like that, right? We're like, oh, geez, they're calling for our assistance. So we're going to go there and we'll go, okay, it didn't happen. So we try and contact the person. They don't want to talk to us. Okay, they're the reporting party. I can't make them. But the behavior continues over and over. We don't want to stop going because what happens if there is somebody trying to break in? But it gets to the point, it's like this person is not seeking mental health help. So maybe we need to introduce them to those services. And by doing so, it's like, okay, having mental health issues isn't a crime, but harassing 911 and tying up those services can be. So we can say, hey, let's send them a ticket, give them a court date. They'll respond to court, and maybe the prosecutor's office can schedule, you know what, we're not so worried about this, but let's get you plugged into some mental health services, maybe solve the root of the problem, right? And so, again, overly simplistic, but it happens. And then what if they don't show up for court and now they have a warrant? So the problem hasn't solved itself. So let's say we arrest them on a warrant. Is jail where we want to go with them? Well, what if there's jail restrictions? We can't book on the warrant anyway, so the warrant's kind of useless, and now the problem doesn't get solved. We need some way to get mental health services plugged in. So that might be the prosecutor's office and the court working up, hey, let's transport to Yakima so at least we know where they are so we can get mental health services plugged in. Right? And then, are we really worried about the criminal activity, so to speak? We are being used as a tool to get them plugged in to get the help they need. So again, overly simplistic, but could be. And example 3 is a mandatory misdemeanor arrest. So in Washington State, domestic violence. Okay, no discretion. We delineate who the primary aggressor is. That person goes to jail. So example 3 is a domestic assault. We determine probable cause for person A. You're going to be arrested for assault 4th degree domestic violence. We do not have a say, right? They go to jail. We have to make arrangements for pets, kids, job, everything that needs to be taken care of before we remove them from the scene, and we book them. So we'll go to Whatcom County Jail and go, hey, this is a misdemeanor assault, it's domestic violence, we're going to book them into jail. And the jail will accept, even on restrictions. But what happens if that arrestee needs medical attention prior to booking? So our officer doesn't go to jail, they go to Peace Health St. Joe's, and they have to wait in line for medical services to check this person out to declare them fit for jail. Last week we had an officer 4 hours. So it's tying up that officer and the services, which we're happy to do in the sense that that's what needs to be done. But it's when you go, geez, you're on this call for 6 hours? Things can add up like that. Or what if the victim, when we remove the arrestee, my partner drives them to jail and the victim needs a special service like relocation or service providers or assistance with kids or something like that. We in good conscience have to stay there and help facilitate that kind of stuff, put them in touch with the services that that person needs. Okay, so overly simplistic, and they're in the packets I'm going to give you all, but that's what I wanted to present. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Sorry it was so rushed and quick, and I know I tend to talk kind of fast and stray from the microphone once or twice, but we'll go from there.
No, I really appreciate it. I think as far as committee, do you have any questions before we open up to council, Pinky?
I do.
I don't know. I'm asking if you do. It looked like you do.
A couple of things. One, I wanted to say thank you very much because this is incredibly complex. And there's a funny thing that happens when you get elected. People think by osmosis you know everything. And that is not the case. And so thank you for breaking it down to very basics so that we can all understand. One of the things that came up for me is that I realized that I don't particularly know the clear definitions of what falls under misdemeanors versus gross misdemeanors. Yeah. So maybe that's something we can put on our list to have a definition of the differences between those two and have that on our site. And also disorderly conduct, what falls under disorderly conduct. I don't know what all those things are that fall under disorderly conduct, so maybe we can include that in our information part. Again, some people are professionals in this. I'm professionals in other things, so thank you for taking me along. One of them was, I'm curious about, and this can be purely anecdotal, I'm not going to hold you to the statistics. Yeah. How often, when you're bringing someone to the triage center, is it full?
Triage center being full, I would easily say well more often than not. What our officers commonly do in the field is we don't transport there until we know it's open, so they'll ask dispatch, hey, can you contact triage, see if they'll take. And if dispatch calls triage and if they're accepting, I think they have, don't hold me to it, I think they only have 16 beds. So if they say, sorry, no room in the inn, and they'll just tell the officer, so then the officer can say, okay, triage is out, Peace Health St. Joe's, here we come. And then we ask dispatch, hey, could you let Peace Health know we're en route there?
So like more than 50%? Again,
easily more than 50%, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
Easily.
Thank you.
Terry, do you have anything before? Okay, Dan, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the warrant piece a little bit better. Thanks for your presentation, by the way.
Yeah,
it's really,
no problem.
really good. I'm looking at a case here where a person had some sitting in line charges and shoplifting under $50, and he was sentenced to 8 days on sitting in line and 10 days on the shoplift charge, and sentenced, and he was in Yakima. So I'm trying to understand because you had mentioned felony warrants in the other material that you had up there.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's the potential to arrest on misdemeanor warrants. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a potential if they have misdemeanor warrants. So like if we contact somebody, person X, and we contact them, it's a legal, valid court transaction, and let's say if the jail says, hey, we have room for that misdemeanor warrant, we can book on a misdemeanor warrant. Yes. If the jail says we don't, then we don't book on that misdemeanor warrant. With regards to sentencing and things like that, if you can, well, like for my age, Schoolhouse Rock, it's like, hey, we don't write the laws, and we don't talk about the laws and argue about the laws. We just enforce the laws that are given to us. So with regards to sentencing and stuff like that, that's way out of my league. But yeah, if I found somebody with a criminal trespass warrant, okay, hey, call to confirm, see if the jail will take. If the jail says, let's say they're super low population, they say, yeah, bring them in. Okay, we'll bring them in. Again, it's a situation that we just kind of are dependent upon somebody else telling us whether or not we can.
Terry?
Just a clarification on what Dan had said. Those warrants, aren't those warrants usually not for the crime, but for failure to appear?
It can be for a whole bunch of stuff. So it can be fail to appear. Let's say if I get a ticket and I'm told to be at court on 9/13 and I don't show, they can issue a warrant. Or let's say I've been doing good with regards to, they say, hey, for 10 weeks you got to play Frogger. Okay, and at 8 weeks I stop. They might issue a warrant for fail to comply. That's all court stuff. And again, we just kind of go, hey, they have a warrant. Does the jail want to take, or does anyone? And that could be a warrant from Blaine, Sumas, Everson, Ferndale. All the little municipalities can have that. It can be a warrant out of Whatcom County. It can be anywhere. State Patrol. I mean, anybody. So.
Michael?
Yes, Officer Ulmer, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
I know you say you presented kind of an idealized and simplified framework for our understanding. That's how it should work. It seems to me the problem can arise when there's misunderstanding or biases in the interaction. I understand the police department now has a mental health professional on staff in the police department. Can you tell me the role of that mental health professional and how it might help officers in the field?
Yeah, so a mental health professional is obviously, we get basically we get crisis intervention training at the officer level, and we trying to understand what mental health crisis looks like. But obviously, I'm not licensed as a practical, hey, you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or anything like that. The mental health professional is awesome for our officers because if we contact somebody who's in crisis, but not at the point where we have that emergent detention, if they just say, hey, I want to talk to somebody or anything like that, we can contact our representative from Compass Health who will actually go out, talk with the person, get them set up for services, and do all that other stuff. And in addition, Washington State just passed a law to where if we have certain kinds of reports, like let's say, hey, Don Ulmer says he is thinking about suicide, but hasn't taken active steps to do that, we will automatically refer that case for a potential mental health crisis to that professional. So they can do some follow-up and check in, hey, how are you doing, and route the appropriate services and or contacts to that person. So it's awesome. She's been working great with the troops in the field, and we're able to give that different service to the public, which is nice.
Follow-up, Michael?
Yeah, so it's great to hear how that professional is helping you on patrol. Does that person also help you with training before you got on patrol? Yeah, are they also a part of your training?
Yeah, so we have ongoing crisis intervention and mental health curriculum training that our department gets every year, and this person works with, I think it's Compass Health is the official title, but Compass Health can also put trainings on, and that person can attend, she attends our briefings, so she'll tell officers, hey, here's things to recognize somebody in crisis, here's what you can do to de-escalate the situation and things like that, and help build, and also be that resource that can come out and talk. Because when we take somebody to like Peace Health for an emergent detention, we can bring them in. We have to write an affidavit. Again, we're taking them potentially against their will. It says, hey, based on these facts and articulable reasoning, you can hold this person until a mental health professional can see them to see what level of crisis they're in. So this person's a great resource because they can actually help with that process as well and check in.
Okay.
Did I answer that? Good?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I guess I've seen some tragic videos that look like they were just basic tragic misunderstandings. And
Okay.
I'd really like to see how our police department can avoid those misunderstandings proactively with training and then in the field at the moment.
Yeah, so generally, a lot of, I don't want to speak for other agencies, but if you've ever heard the term in-service training, so the state mandates every officer in every department gets 24 hours of training every year. So that's the state standard. So if I go to 25, I'm good. So our patrol division, every other Friday we have a training day. So if I attend all 12 of those, and it's 12, they're 10-hour sessions each, I'm going to get 120 hours every year. And that's in addition to like if I'm a K-9 officer and do that, or I'm on bomb squad or a crisis negotiator or anything like that. That's all additional training. So we feel real good at our agency because we're afforded the resources to provide that training to our officers and get that, such as de-escalation, crisis intervention, things like that. So that's what we're trying to do, because for us, the more you're trained, it's like any profession though, right? Like you find folks, you might not know this, and you can read it in a book and you can educate yourself, but once you actually it's like cooking. I tell my kids, to do is to understand. Read a cookbook, great, but mash all the stuff together and cook it, that's where you actually learn what works and what doesn't. So hopefully this is your first step, read it, but get involved, ask questions, come out, look, see how we do things. That's where you're going to get an understanding of oh, okay, this is how it works. This is how we do things.
Well, thank you. I think for the community, we're in a process of going through some informational sessions. I know there's a lot here that I would love to dig into, like why are our policies doing this and kind of not getting the result that we want. But I think that's at a later conversation after we really understand, hopefully, a lot of these systems, and then we'll be digging in more. I do think that these are going to warrant an hour probably each time, just because I imagine that's about what we're going to use.
Oh, sorry.
So we don't, no, you're fine. We need to take the time to do it. If we, it's kind of that go slow to go fast. So I think it's really important. Chief, do you have anything, or Mayor, that you wanted to say before we close?
Reiterate what Lieutenant Ulmer mentioned, and he's right. To do is to understand. So I know some of you have ridden out with the officers in the past. I'd offer that to you again. Talk to Don, talk to Lieutenant Monson. They'll set you up with a ride along and try to get you on a shift where you're going to see some of these things, because reading about it, as he said, or imagining it is one thing. Seeing it happen in the field is an entirely different issue. The other thing that I would like to mention is it's an oversimplification, as Don said, but every piece of it has to work. And if somewhere along the way a service is unavailable, as he mentioned, maybe the triage center is not available, or if we can't get somebody that's maybe not in full crisis, but we understand they're showing those signs over a period of a couple of days because we've had those calls with them, that's where we're unable to do a lot of things. We might be able to talk to our CPIT individual and say, can you come out and talk to them? They can offer them services. But our officers literally watch people deteriorate. And in many cases, when it gets to that point where they have to go, it's a mandatory situation, it's gone too far. It's along the way where we're missing some opportunities. And I think as this process continues, you might understand where those points of opportunity occur.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mayor?
And I just want to thank Officer Ulmer and Chief for being here today. And I have to tell you, when I look at the escalation in training that our police department is going through now, since we ended the recession, and now we're having the opportunity to make sure that our officers get that kind of training that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I'm very appreciative of both the council's support of doing that and the officers' willingness to go through the training. That puts us, obviously you heard what the minimum was, far above the minimum of many other police departments, and I think it shows.
Okay. Oh, Pinky, one more, and then we'll close.
I just had one last comment. I just wanted to say, I know not every day is perfect and situations change, but all in all, I have such pride about our Bellingham Police Department, and I know not all of the people that I work with on different city councils, et cetera, have that same kind of respect and gratitude and appreciation for the work that you do, and I just want to say thank you.
Okay. With that, end of committee.